Palestinians preparing to march in support of a bid for statehood at the UN later this month could face more than they bargained for. Israel has given security forces in West Bank settlements a license to shoot at protesters. Organizers insist the rallies will be peaceful and will not approach settler homes. But Israel says it's preparing for every eventuality. Well, let's now get more from our correspondent, Paula Sleer. So, Paula, is giving this authorization more likely to make events spin out of control, you think?
Well, that certainly is the concern on the ground. I mean, already now in some quarters there is talk of a third intifada that some will say will be as bloody and as violent as the first two. Settlers, of whom there are some 400,000 living in a land that has some 2.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank, are bracing themselves for violence, as is the Israeli army and the Israeli police. Now, for several months, the Israeli army has been preparing in an operation it calls Operation Summer Seeds, and it's now in the final stages of putting the finishing touches in place. To this end, we're being told that they have demarcated a red line around every settlement in the West Bank, and what this means is that Palestinians who approach further beyond that red line will be shot at by soldiers who will have permission to do this. Now, there also has been intensive training in terms of security groups within these settlements. They have been participating in drills that the army's been undergoing. They've been provided with stun grenades, with water cannons, as well as with tear gas canisters. We're also being told that some $20 million has been spent on training the police alone, that 28,000 police officers have been mobilized around the country. One of the focal points that they'll be watching is Jerusalem, which is where many fear most of the violence could erupt.
Well, Paul, it seems like Israel has been more focused on the Palestinian drive for statehood than its own internal problems. Is that so?
Well, certainly that is one of the criticisms that's been leveled at the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On Saturday, we saw the largest protest in this country's history, where some 400,000 demonstrators took to the streets of 10 cities. Here in Tel Aviv was one of the focal points. A number of speakers, a number of artists addressed the crowd. They spoke about making history. They said really that this was a turning point in the history of this country. What protesters have been demanding for the better part of 2 months is social issue justice. Really what they're saying is that the Netanyahu government needs to be less focused on issues of security and more focused on internal problems such as the high cost of living in this country. And this is a criticism that Netanyahu is facing, a criticism that he is spending too much time on issues on the international agenda rather than addressing real domestic concerns here at home. Just this past weekend, Turkey expelled the Israeli ambassador and froze all military cooperation between both countries. The relationship between Israel and Egypt is at an all-time low after Israeli fire mistakenly killed a number of Egyptian border guards. So with that kind of regional isolation, and certainly in the context that it's just several weeks before Palestinians will be appealing to the UN for recognizing their unilateral declaration of statehood, there is a lot of concern that what is happening on the international stage is really becoming an excuse for the Netanyahu government not to address real concerns that people have here. I mean, talking to protesters, they accuse Netanyahu of being passive, of being unresponsible, and of being out of touch with what people in Israel are concerned about.